Look, why did I just hit myself in the face if not to convince you to read this book? I need to have the physical copy of this book so I can do this and hold it. Next up is a book that I picked up purely for the cover, although you should always support Asian authors across the diaspora. Fun fact. Hello there, and welcome to my channel, or welcome back. My name is Priyanka, or PM in writing or on stage, because I am a spoken word poet, aspiring author, and bookish content creator. We are sitting on the floor today behind my very empty bookshelf because I'm in the process of reorganizing it. And I took out all of the books that I had gotten from work. For context, I work at Penguin Random House, and half of my bookshelf disappeared. I'm not even joking. I posted about this on Instagram stories and I was mind blown by how many books I have acquired from work, and I was like, wouldn't it be fun if I just sit down and talk about all the books that I have gotten and I am so excited to read, because as we all know, book collecting and book reading are two very different hobbies. I thought we could do a video that's kind of like a little haul video where I just chat at you guys. Disclaimer, Penguin Random House have not paid me to do this at all. I just work at Penguin, and obviously I work there, so I like books. I like the books that we publish, so I have taken them home and not read them. I have split the books into 3 piles. So the first pile is fiction, which was so big, I did not realize how many fiction books I had. The second pile, that was considerably smaller, was poetry, because we published some amazing poets and I love them very much. The next pile is Penguin Black Spine Classics / Modern Classics. And then the final pile that I have is self-help / personal development / graphic novels / miscellaneous. And it's quite ironic because in my current role at the moment, I have literally just been categorizing books for most of the week, so we love bringing the work home. So the fiction pile, I don't know if you can see, has already collapsed and is slowly squishing my leg. So let's start with the fiction books first. First up, we have Bewilderment by Richard Powers. So in Bewilderment, we follow an astrobiologist called Theo Barn, who has been searching for signs of life in space while he navigates his relationship with his troubled 9-year-old son, Robin. And I think something that's really interesting about books that I often find is that you can describe the plot of a book, but in one sentence. That doesn't sound very interesting. However, well, at least to me personally. However, if you can see, I don't know if this is in focus, but it won the 2021 Booker Prize, which, if you don't know, is like a really big literary fiction prize. And it just goes to show that sometimes it's more about the writing, right? And I really love literary fiction. I'm a huge literary fiction nerd, and I feel like I've not been reading enough of it recently, which is why I picked this book as well. And the paperback should also be coming out soon. I am actually more of a paperback bitch than a hardback bitch, I will have you know. Next up is one that I have seen so much about online and I just instinctively grabbed off the shelf, and it is Transcendent Kingdom by Yagasai. The plot is centered around a PhD student named Gifty. Gifty does experiments with mice on their brains to see how they can adjust to certain behaviors. Her own brother, Nana, died at the age of 11 from a heroin overdose, and her mother went into a deep depression shortly after. So her research focuses on depression and the brain. And I know there's also stuff about basketball, which is why I didn't realize this until I was looking at the cover the other day, but I don't know if you can see, there is like the basketball court in the cover, which I thought was also so beautifully done. Next is China Room by Sanjeev Sota, and this is one that I am so excited for. Definitely also one to pick up during AAPI History Month, although you should always support Asian authors across the diaspora. Fun fact. And I know that this is a dual narrative. So one of the narratives is set in 1929 Punjab, and it's about a woman called Mehar who is a bride-to-be, and she's trying to figure out the identity of her husband, because we love Indian culture where in arranged marriages where you don't know your husband until you're about to get married. And the second narrative is set in 1999, and we follow, I think, an unnamed protagonist who has moved from England to Punjab to try and separate himself from his life and overcome his issues with addiction. Next up is one that I know people will probably be excited for, which is The Island of Missing Trees by Alif Shafak. I love both the hardback and the paperback cover of this because look at that foil, look at that shine, look at how beautiful it is, and of course, such a beautiful story as well. I feel like everyone at my work is crazy about Alif Shafak, and I can completely understand why. She seems like such a cool person. And The Island of Missing Trees is set in 1974 Cyprus, and it revolves around the relationship between two teenagers, one who is Turkish and Muslim, the other who is Greek and Christian, and it's about how they meet secretly in a tavern and fall in love, and it's just so beautiful and I can't wait to read it. Next up is a book that I knew nothing about, but look at how chunky that is. That is a heavy hardback. And it is Grownups by Marion Keyes. I know a few people at work are like super crazy about Marion Keyes, obviously, but I have not read any of her stuff. I just saw that this book was gonna go to charity and I was like, no, I'm the charity, which is pretty much how I got most of these books. And I think this book is about the Casey family and their relationships and how people in the family clash but also come together. So definitely like a proper contemporary fiction kind of novel. Next up is a book that I picked up purely for the cover. Are you sensing a theme here? Because you would not be wrong. Which is When We Were Birds by Ayanna Lloyd Banwo. Because look at that cover, would you have not picked it up as well? And funny story about this book is that it was on display at London Book Fair, which I got to go to as part of my new role, which was very cool, very fun, highly recommend. It was one of several books that I brought home with me, and I brought a whole Waitrose bag full of books home from London Book Fair, which was very fun and was actually a great way that I got to know someone, or like one of my colleagues, because I basically asked her if I could take her Waitrose bag so I could take all the books I took from London Book Fair home. And that's a little insight into publishing. And so, because I only took it for the cover, I cannot tell you what this is about, but I will leave links below to the Penguin website so you can check out all of these books if you're interested. Next up is another proof copy of a book that I am actually so excited to read because it's a little thin one, which means I will get through it quickly, which is The Last White Man by Mohsen Hamid. This is such an interesting premise. It is essentially a dystopian novel where Anders, a white man, wakes up to find that he is brown, which is amazing. I am so excited to read this and be like, yeah, that's right, that's what it's like being brown. And speaking of brown people, next up is a book that I absolutely love. Everyone should read this book. I love it so much. I picked up this book because I got the ebook and I was like, I need to have the physical copy of this book so I can do this and hold it. It is The Mismatch by Sarah Jafari, and if you follow me on Instagram, you might have already seen that I have recommended this book to death and spoken about it so much. It's such a good book, and it is such a good book, and it is also dual narrative. So in the first narrative, we follow Soraya, who is a graduate from Goldsmiths University, and she's just graduated in English literature, and she's trying to figure out what to do with her life. But she realizes that she doesn't have much like sexual experience, and so she tries to get with the jock of the university called Magnus, who's like this hench white rugby player. And so it's about how she navigates like her first love, and like particularly also an interracial love, because she comes from quite a strict Muslim household because she is British Iranian. And so the second narrative that weaves in with this one is from the point of view of Soraya's mum, Neda, and it follows her immigration from Iran to Britain, because that's where Soraya was brought up, and it is so good. Please read it. Next up is another book that I am very excited for, which is Theatre of Marvels by Leanne Dillsworth. So Theatre of Marvels follows Zila, who is a black actress in a theatre in Victorian England. But because she is black, a lot of the spectacle of her being an actress is of course tied to racism and colonialism, and so the book follows her search for identity, and also I think there's a little bit of mystery in there as well. So the premise is so exciting, and I feel like I also know the author did a master's in Victorian studies, so she is so well versed, and I'm sure she knows so much more about this time period than I ever could, so I am so excited to read this one. Next up is one that I know most people will know either from Book Talk or Bookstagram or BookTube or like anywhere that talks about books on the internet, which is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I picked up the proof copy as soon as I saw them in like the shelves on my floor at work, because I was like, I need to know what the hype is about. I do actually want to do a video where I talk about Emily Henry books, so if you'd be interested in that, please leave a comment and let me know, because I would love to read all 3 of her books and find out what the hype is about. I'm sure I don't need to explain this one to you. Next up is We Are All Birds of Uganda by Hafsa Zayan, and I don't think you can see the cover properly. Let me move this a bit closer so you can see it. Ooh. Lovely book. And this book, I feel like I keep saying I'm really excited, but I am genuinely excited for this. So I believe this is also a dual narrative and is set in 1960s Uganda, and we follow a family and their chronicle from immigration, and I think it's spread across like a century. So immigration from Uganda to London. And so the second narrative is set in present day London, and we follow our protagonist Samir, who is like a very successful lawyer, but he feels quite empty, and when he is called back home because of an issue, he is also trying to figure out who he is and what his ties are to Uganda. And honestly, the reason I'm so excited for this is because a lot of people don't know that during like the period of, I think, like the 40s to the 60s, there was huge immigration from India to Uganda and Kenya and a lot of other African countries. And so I'm really excited, because my family also have ties to Kenya, to see if I can also like explore a little bit of that part of my identity as well, and find out more about fellow Indians and South Asians who migrated to African countries as well. Next up is an absolutely stunning proof copy of this book. Let me just move this a bit closer so you can see it. Oh, amazing. Which is This Place Is Still Beautiful by Shishi Chan. Hopefully I said that right. And I actually know this book because I've had to write a bit of copy about it, and I have been trying to highlight it more. And it is a YA novel that follows 2 sisters, Margaret and Anna Lee, and their family are victims of a racial attack. And it is about how the 2 sisters take different approaches navigating that trauma. One of the sisters wants to pretend like it never happened, and the other one wants to fight. And of course, an amazing read for AAPI History Month. And I actually also did a little Instagram post about it as well. Next up is Set on You by Amy Lee, which is a romance book, and is actually pretty similar to the book that I'm reading at the moment, which I cannot remember the name of. I will put it here, which also focuses on body positivity and fitness and romance. And it is an enemies to lovers between a curvy fitness influencer named Crystal and a firefighter called Scott, who starts taking up her space in the gym, and they both get pissed off at each other and fall in love. It's an enemies to lovers. Next up is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. Let me just show you. So I have 2 copies of this book. Both are proof copies. The book is not set to be out until August, but let me just show you how amazing this foil one is, and then let me show you this one, which is amazing, right? So it's a box, and then on the side it says PC DVD. When you pull it out of the box, it looks like a CD. So it looks like you're taking a DVD out of the box. How cool is that? And everyone on my team is so in love with this book, and honestly, it is not hard to see why. Aside from the amazing cover, the storyline is also really good. So the storyline of Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, try saying that 5 times fast, is set in 1987, and 2 kids come together in a hospital room and are united by their love of video games despite all this shit going on in their lives around them. And honestly, I am so excited to read this because I am a big fat nerd who also plays Animal Crossing every time I am sad. So now that we've done fiction, let's move on to my fave poetry. First up is this amazing collection called If All the World and Love Were Young by Stephen Sexton. And actually this is also video games related, so I totally planned that segue. And essentially Stephen navigates the loss of his mother through video games, particularly Mario games. So there's one poem about, or like a few poems about like Yoshi's Island, for example, and that's why on the cover you can see there's the little Mario coin, and the poems are so beautiful and cover themes of grief and love, and it's so good. So my camera battery died, so we are on to the next day, still chatting about books. And what I was saying before my camera rudely interrupted me is the next book that I wanted to talk about is All the Flowers Kneeling by Paul Tran, which I have been raving about this on my Instagram. I fucking love this so much, and I cannot tell you anything else. When you get so enthusiastic about poetry, you need to read this. Look, why did I just hit myself in the face if not to convince you to read this book? I also have the proof copy because I wanted to read it before it went into the finished copy because that's how much I love it. And one thing that I just want to show you, even before I talk about the book, is look at how fierce Paul Tran's author photo is. If that is not good enough, actually wait, let me put it here so you can see it. If that is not a good enough reason to read this poetry collection, I don't know what is. The collection is really cool because not only does it include a new form of poetry, which I will leave a little bit more information about in the description, it uses the story of Scheherazade to talk about Paul Tran's own grief and their experiences with being a Vietnamese trans person and their trauma surrounding immigration, being an immigrant, and also their experiences with sexual assault as someone who's part of the LGBTQ+ community. Next up, we have one that I think a few people will have heard about by now because it came out in 2020, which is Poor by Caleb Femi. Admittedly, I have not read this yet, but I've heard so many good things about it, and essentially I know that this collection won the Forward Prize, and it was really nice actually hearing people in the office talking about the Forward Prize ceremony because people were saying it was like the first time where like someone got a standing ovation at the Forward Prize ceremony, which was amazing when I think Caleb Femi gave his speech. And essentially it is about Caleb Femi's life growing up in Peckham, which is a part of South London. And it's really interesting because if I show you, the poems appear alongside like pictures. So for example, you get stuff like that, and then some more kind of like realistic shots. So I think that is, for example, like the estate that he's talking about. Next up is one that I think a few people might have heard about, which is Blessed Be the Daughter Raised by a Voice in Her Head by Warsan Shiri. And I actually did a review of this on my TikTok and my Instagram, and I loved this so much because one thing that I really liked is that Warsan Shiri was not afraid to use her language. And what I mean by that is Warsan Shiri is Somali British, and she included a glossary at the back of the collection, and she included, I believe, words from the Somali language in her collection, and she wasn't afraid to just put it out into the world and be like, you people who don't know anything about my culture, most likely white people, have to put in the work and read from this glossary and refer back to it, which is really interesting because I remember learning about it in university, in that it is a kind of power play for people who have been colonized to kind of throw their language back unashamedly at the colonizer and be like, actually, you were the ones that forced the colonial language down our throat, now we can throw it back at you, and you're the ones who have to put in the work to assimilate and understand. So I thought that was really cool. Next is one that I am sure that like everyone has heard about in some capacity, which is Time is a Mother by Ocean Vuong. This is a proof copy and the actual collection is in hardback form, but I honestly prefer reading poetry in paperback form. I don't know if it's just me, and I have heard so many good things about this. I'm also so excited to read it. But if you don't know who Ocean Vuong is, they are an amazing Vietnamese poet, and they've won so many prizes for their work, and explores themes of like parenthood, hence the title, and grief and loss and love, and I'm very excited to read this one too. And then the next proof copy of a book is one that I have that came out recently and was actually one of the first campaigns that I worked on at work and I actually really enjoyed, which is The Penguin Book of Spiritual Verse, edited by Kaveh Akbar. And Kaveh is such a lovely person and poet, so if you have not checked out his work, please do. The way he writes is really abstract, but so emotive. Like, you'll read it and just be like, oh my god. And The Penguin Book of Spiritual Verse is basically exactly what it sounds like. It's a collection of spiritual verse, but we literally start from like the first ever poem written by a woman and then go all the way up to, I think, the present day. And honestly, I was so lucky to be able to help out with a part of this campaign, and I genuinely recommend picking up a copy. Obviously, this is a proof, so it's a lot smaller, but the finished cover is beautiful. So if nothing else, pick it up for that. So rather than making this video a million hours long and showing you every single book, I thought it'd be good to split this video into 2 parts. So if you'd be interested in a part 2, where I talk about all of the graphic novels and self-help slash miscellaneous books, and also all my Penguin Classic books, then please leave a comment below or give this video a thumbs up so I know that you're interested. Although I'm probably gonna do it anyways, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.